Chapter 26 The Road. At first, Roz thought she was looking at an undersea lava flow that had hardened into rock. Then she discovered the painted yellow lines. This wasn't old lava, it was an old road. The road made for easier walking, so Roz followed it through the undersea landscape. It curved around rugged reefs and rolled over sandy slopes. One slope climbed so high that she rose up from the ocean surface and continued on, wading through knee-deep water. Surrounding her were small islands, scattered with abandoned buildings. Those islands had been hills until the nearby lowlands flooded. The robot tried to imagine what this place was like before the flood waters. Had there been a park where she was now walking? Athletes' fields? Farms? Suddenly, Roz was remembering her time on Hilltop Farm. She thought of the Sharif family and their herd of cows. She wondered if Jad and Jaya still thought about her. Without those children, our robot never would have made it home to the island. Roz waded through the mid-ocean shallow until the road sloped downward, and she descended beneath the surface, where she found more signs of civilization. Old mailboxes crusted with barnacles, an abandoned automobile draped with seaweed, metal fencing spiked with urchins. The underwater road stretched far ahead toward a jumble of murky shapes. With each step Roz took, the shapes became clearer, and she saw that the road was leading her to a town that had been completely submerged by the ocean. Chapter 27 The Town. The ocean had risen only slightly when it flooded into this low-lying town. Humans built barriers to keep the water out, but it kept finding new ways to get in. Eventually, the humans packed up their things and left. As the ocean continued rising, the town gradually disappeared beneath the waves. Streets were buried under sand. Flower gardens were replaced with gardens of corals and sea sponges. Wooden structures were swept away, and now all that remained were structures made of steel or stone. Our robot marched through the underwater town until she came to a building that had once been a grocery store. Some of its walls had collapsed, and its flimsy roof rocked side to side with the waves, but it was still standing. Inside, the store was dark except for a few columns of daylight shining down from holes in the ceiling. Roz peered through the open doorway and said, "Hello, is anybody in there?" A voice hollered back, "Get out of here!" And the creature shot through the door and latched on Roz's head. Then somehow the creature began shocking the robot with powerful electric pulses. The pulses slowed and stopped, and when the creature released its grip, Roz fell to the ground. "Go on, get out of here," said the creature. "Or do you want another shock?" "I do not want another shock," said Roz in a garbled voice. Electricity had overwhelmed her circuits, but then her recovery program activated, and after a moment she was fully functional again. Roz looked up from the ground and saw a large gray fish with a flat circular body. It was a ray, not a stingray, not a manta ray, but an electric ray. The electric ray stared at the robot and said, "What kind of sea monster are you?" "I'm not any kind of a sea monster. I'm a robot. My name is Roz." Just then, a hermit crab came scuttling over. Instead of wearing a seashell on his back like most hermit crabs, he wore a rusty old soup can. The crab climbed up Roz's leg and onto her chest and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're all right. You'll have to forgive my friend Zap. She can be overly protective of our sea cave." "That is not a sea cave," said Roz. "That is the flooded grocery store." "Really?" said the crab, clicking his claws. "Interesting. In that case, Zap can be overly protective of our flooded grocery store." "What was I supposed to do?" muttered Zap. He looked dangerous. She looked dangerous. The ray's face scrunched up with confusion. "Tell me, Roz, are you male or female?" "Technically, robots are not male or female. However, I have been programmed to feel like a female." "Interesting," said the crab. Ross, there's someone I think you should meet. Follow me. The hermit crab's name was Scoot. He scuttled into the stores as Ross and Zap trailed behind him. There wasn't much to see besides junk and shadows. The flooded grocery store was a dreary, dismal place. Pretty nice spot, isn't it? Said Scoot. It certainly is unique, said Ross politely. Scoot crawled across the broken floor and over to a heap of shelves that were covered with sand. Then he said, Ripple, are you up there? Ross didn't see who Scoot was calling to, but when she took a closer look at the sandy shelves, she noticed that they were packed with small fish that blended in with their background. One of the fish floated out and said, Yes, what is it, Scoot? Ah, there you are, Ripple, said the hermit crab. I'd like you to meet Ross, the robot. You're both, how do I say this? You're both a little different. Ross is a male or female, and Ripple is both male and female. Isn't that interesting? That's not quite right, said Ripple. I was born a female, and then I changed it to a male. We gobies do that from time to time. Ripple was a type of fish called a goby. Ross scrolled through her computer brain for information about gobies and about all the other creatures who were a little different. Many other types of fish can change back and forth between male and female. Certain kinds of frogs can change in similar ways. Some species of animal are not male or female, and some species are both. And just like that, our robot felt more connected to the natural world. Ross described her life on the island, and the sea creatures smiled as they imagined her living on dry land. But their smiles vanished when she mentioned the poison tide. They'd all heard about the poison tide, but it had seemed like a distant problem, not anything that would ever concern them. After listening to Ross, though, the problem felt awfully near. I will do everything in my power to stop the poison tide, said Ross. But first, I must find the ancient shark. I need her help. I grew up hearing stories about the ancient shark, said Zap. They say she has spies throughout all the oceans. Her species could be watching us right now. Scoot glanced around nervously as Zap continued. But the ancient shark lives up in the far north. What are you doing here, Ross? I am passing through on my way to the far north. I still have a long journey ahead. Well, don't waste your time with us, said Zap. Go find the ancient shark. Go stop the poison tide. Go on, Ross. Get moving. Oh, okay, you are right. I should be going. Goodbye, my friends. I have enjoyed our time together. The sea creatures waved and said goodbye as Ross hurried back through the flooded grocery store and out the door. Chapter 28. The Observations. Seaweed swayed with the passing waves. Tiny krill gathered in vast swarms. Currents rushed down from the north. Fallen cargo lay on the seafloor. Underwater mountains slowly crumbled. Corals clustered on shipwrecks. Seabirds hunted schools of fish. Ships sailed across the surface. Mysterious creatures groaned in the deep. Little bits of plastic floated everywhere. An undersea robot observed it all. Chapter 29. The Dead Island. Ahead, the ocean gently shimmered, and then clouds of dust came billowing past the robot. Ross has encountered the poison tide once again. As she marched through the cloudy water, the ocean became shallower and rougher. Waves started rolling overhead, and their motion sent her tumbling. She popped to the surface, and suddenly a gigantic wave was carrying her away. The wave's curling face pushed her along, lifting her higher and higher, until the pig toppled forward and the robot went crashing into the surf. Sea foam and sand sloshed around her, and when the water receded, Ross saw that she was lying on the beach of an island. This island was very different from the robot's home island. It had no mountains, no waterfalls, no forests. It was just a field of shrubs and grass and a few scraggly trees. A long wind had sprayed the poison tide across the island, turning the plants brittle and bare. There should have been leaves rustling and insects buzzing, but all was still and quiet. The island was dead. Dry grass crackled underfoot as Ross crossed the dead island, and then she discovered something unexpected. Mushrooms, lots of them. And where the mushrooms grew, the soil was darker, richer, healthier. Mushrooms are fascinating things. They are not plants or animals, they are fungus. Surprisingly, the fungal growth were surviving in that harsh environment. The robot's computer brain went to work and found that certain kinds of mushrooms were capable of healing the land by absorbing toxic substances. And when Ross studied the ground, she spotted tiny green sprouts trying to take root. If only the poison tide would go away, this island could recover, which meant her own island could recover too. The robot felt a little boost of hope, and she marched back into the waves and continued her long journey north. Chapter 30. The Storm. Ross was walking along the bottom of another shallow sea. The poison tide clouded her vision, so she had to move slowly. But with each step, the changing current swept away more dust clouds until the water was clear. Then a new problem emerged. Heavy rains began pounding the surface. Choppy waves began stirring up sand from the seafloor. The dark sky began rumbling and flashing. Boom! A deafening sound blasted through the water. It wasn't thunder. It was lightning hitting a wave. A lightning strike could easily destroy the robot, and her survival instincts flared. Ross increased her speed, marching north as fast as she could, but the current was working against her. Boom! Another flash sizzled across the waves. Ross needed to get far away from there, so she kicked off from the ground and swam with the current, and soon she was moving at a blustering speed. Boom! The robot pumped her arms and legs, pushing the limits of her body as she tried to escape from the storm. The seafloor passed beneath her, faster and faster, and then it suddenly dropped off. Ross glided over the edge of an undersea cliff, and with the storm still raging above, she dove straight down into the gloom. The thunder and lightning and the rough water near the surface were replaced by the still, silent darkness of the deep ocean.